Let's go into our lesson right away. No, that's not what I want. All right, so introduction. When you're thinking about your introduction, you want to focus on who your readers are. So these are some basic questions you need to be answering in your intro. Every time you write an introduction, I want to be clear that this is for a formal paper. So this isn't just a regular 5-paragraph essay. This is for a formal paper that has a literature review, methods, results, and conclusions. So that you, because it would be a lot of information to include in an introduction for a 5-paragraph essay. In a shorter essay, you would include a lot of this, but not in as much detail. In a formal research article, you provide a lot of detail in your introduction. And because you are in STEM fields or in business, your introductions are very explicit. You have to actually state everything very clearly. In a humanities introduction, you don't use the word I, you don't use the first person, but you guys can use the first person. So you need to address all of these questions. Who are my readers and how can I appeal to them? What does existing research say about this topic? What is the historical background and significance of it? What is missing in existing research that I can address? How can I situate my work within this research? How is my work significant or unique? What makes my work crucial for my field? What is the structure of my paper? And what is the main purpose of my paper? All right, so I want you to we're off the bat going back to the quiz. So pause the video, go back to the quiz. What you're going to be doing is just free writing. You're going to be writing all your ideas out. I don't want you to have your article out, your 4 articles for your paper. I just want you to write as much as you can. Give yourself a timer, set it to 15 minutes, and you're going to try to answer these questions off the top of your head with memory. And you can maybe think of examples from the articles, but don't have them out in front of you. I don't want you to get stuck. So the idea of free writing is that you write as much as you can without stopping in 15 minutes or in a specific amount of time. And that way you're getting all the ideas that are in your mind out onto the paper or onto the screen and ready to use and organize later on. You're likely going to piece it apart, copy and paste it, and take some of it, put it in different parts of your paper, and leave only some of it in your introduction. But it's really good to get all of these ideas out and just get it started. If you find that after 10 minutes you haven't written anything, wait until 15 minutes goes by, see how much you've written, and then maybe the next day, give yourself a day, the next day go back to it. I like to, before I write, I read a lot, I get really prepared, and I think a lot. So I go for a walk, I think about what I'm going to write, I think about what I'm going to free write, what I'm going to write down before I actually organize my paper. And it kind of just starts to come to me. My voice kind of tells me what to write in my head, and then I'm able to write it all down really, really quickly. And then after that, I organize all of my ideas. So processing things in your mind is really important. So I encourage you to not only free write before writing, but actually think about it before you start free writing. So first step is to think about your topic. Think about these questions. Second step is to free write. Just write it all down without thinking about organization, no thinking about grammar. If you forget a word in English, then write it in your first language and then go back and find the other word and just write. Third step is to organize. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and do those first 2 steps right now. All right, so after you've done question 1 from the quiz, we're going to be looking at this. I really like this way of looking at writing an introduction from our textbook. So you're creating a research space. So you're kind of establishing those questions in the last. So these questions right here. What does existing research say about this topic? What is the historical background and significance of it? What is missing in the existing research that I can address? And how can I situate my work within this research? This is exactly what you're doing. You're creating a space for you. So imagine that the research that's already been done on this topic is a huge conversation. It may have been happening for centuries, maybe only for the last 10 years if you're in new technology. But you need to find a place where you fit into that conversation. Is there something missing in the research that you can fill the hole? Is there something that somebody started? Maybe they started this idea and you want to finish it. There are a lot of ways that your ideas can fit in, and you don't want to just assume that your reader knows everything about your field and knows how you fit in. You don't want them to do that kind of work. You need to do that work. So think about the research in your field on the same topic. Think about how you fit in. Do you contrast with any of the researchers? Do you agree with the researchers? You're supporting them, giving them support that you think other people aren't giving them. Maybe you're noticing everybody is critiquing this one researcher, but you actually appreciate their research, so you're writing in order to support their ideas. Whatever it is, you need to situate yourself inside of that existing research, which requires you to explain what that existing research is. So in your introduction, you need to give that background on what is already happening around your topic and around your research. And show how your paper is worthwhile to read. So here, there are different moves, different things you can do, an action that you can do in your introduction to do this. So establish a research territory, showing that the general research is important, central, interesting, problematic, or relevant in some way. Not everybody does this in their introductions, but is recommended. So just open up the general debate and explain why your topic is important in general. By introducing and reviewing items of previous research in the area, completely obligatory, you have to do that. Always have to give that background. Okay, establishing a niche. Niche is a segment, like a way that you can fit in. So think about it like a big puzzle, and it's just one puzzle piece. You are one puzzle piece. Try to figure out how you fit into that puzzle. So by indicating a gap in the previous research or by extending previous knowledge in some way, you have to show, are you filling in a hole that you think there's missing information in the research, or are you elaborating on somebody else's research? Occupying a niche. So outlining purposes or stating the nature of the present research, listing questions and hypotheses, announcing principal findings, stating the value of the present research, and indicating the structure of the research paper. So you can do this, you can do some of these or all of these in your paper depending on whether or not they're relevant for you. For example, you might not have a hypothesis, but you might have questions, so you can answer those questions in the rest of the paper. So this is kind of, you're saying why you're writing your paper here, and then you're saying how you're doing it here, how you're establishing yourself, how you are going to elaborate on this, and what you're going to answer in your paper. Okay, so I want you to go to quiz 7 and complete part 1, quiz 2. This involves going over to your 4 articles, take them out. You've read them all, you've written summaries on them, you know them back and forth by now, probably, I hope. And you're going to look at the introduction and see if you can see this. Do the authors do these things? I want you to find the article that does it the most. So find the best introduction, the introduction that establishes the territory, establishes that author's niche in the research and then occupies that. So which introduction is the most effective? Pull that one article out. I want you to show me with quotations how the author does this to show me that you understand what it means, and then explain. So provide quotes, show how the author does this, and explain if you think and why you think the introduction is effective. Okay, so pause the video and go do question 2. All right, since you've done question 1 and question 2, you are ready to talk about the rationale. So we're going to be developing the rationale. This might be kind of a weird word. It's not rational, it's rationale. And rationale means, why are you doing this? Why is it important? So it is crucial to include the following. The topic you chose to study is important because, you have to say this. The topic I chose to study is important because, or this issue is crucial since ... The approach I'm taking in this study is unique, or is the best one for my purposes because, so you're talking about this is occupying the niche. This is establishing where you are in the research. This is occupying it. So you're saying, this is why it's important, and this is why how I write this paper or how I did this research is the best way to do it. The strategies or statistical techniques I chose for analysis are the best ones for my data because. So you're trying to prove yourself. You're saying your introduction is your opportunity to prove how well thought out your paper and your research are. Okay, so let's look at an example. Qualitative research methods are unsurpassed for researching problems and phenomena for which the variables are unknown and need to be explored. Okay, so this is saying that there are areas, so basically starting out with there are areas that are unknown and need to be explored. What is the best way to research that? Qualitative research methods. So this is explaining why the author used qualitative research methods to conduct this research. This is in the active voice. Qualitative research methods are unsurpassed. Active, simple, present. It's just a fact. So you don't want to flip it around and talk about the object first, and then it's just too confusing. So just use the active voice. You sound very confident. It's good to use that. So again, you're developing a rationale. You're explaining why your topic is so important. So you can use any of these templates to do that. And then here's the example of, here's one example. So in part 2, in questions 3 and 4, question 3, you're basically looking at your articles and trying to find an instant in any of the articles. Maybe all of them have an example of this, or maybe only one has an example of this, of the author providing a rationale. They should. If they're good writers, they should be providing a rationale. They should be explaining why they made the decisions they made, both in choosing the topic to research, asking the question that they did, choosing the research methods that they chose, talking about the authors that they end up talking about in their literature review. I mean, the authors that they use to support them. There are a lot of things that you need to explain why you did them. You can do it explicitly like this, or you can do it more subtly by just giving more background on the issue, but you need to provide some kind of rationale. So in question 3, you're looking at those articles, their introductions, and seeing how do they show why this issue, why this topic is important. We kind of went over this a couple of weeks ago, so I hope you remember the importance of this activity. And so I want you to find one example, hopefully from each article. Just type out the sentence. It should just be one sentence. And then in question 4, you're going to create your own. So it can be in any instance, but you're going to create, it can be in any instance. For example, one would be explaining why you chose that topic, why the question is important, or why you chose that research method, or why you chose these specific scholars or researchers to use as examples. Okay. So after completing questions 3 and 4 on the quiz, you're going to craft your statement of purpose, which is probably the most important part of the introduction. You might be wondering why we're looking at the introduction first. A lot of authors or researchers suggest writing the introduction last, because if you've already written all of the other sections of your paper, it's much easier to come up with ideas for the introduction. However, the problem with that is that the rest of your paper might be completely disorganized. Writing the introduction first can be kind of like an outline. So instead of writing a skeletal outline, you can actually just write your intro, get a good idea of what your paper is going to look like. And then if your paper doesn't end up looking like that, then just go back and change the introduction. There's no problem with going back and changing things in the intro. I've done that many times. If you are in science and you have a hypothesis, obviously you're not going to change your hypothesis to fit with your results, but you can change the organization of your introduction if you end up changing things in your methods section, or you end up having different conclusions in the end. But by the time you're writing your paper, you should pretty much have your results. You should pretty much have a good idea of what you're saying, but you just haven't written it down yet. Writing the introduction first just helps you get these ideas out and feel more confident when you are trying to organize the rest of your paper. And the most important part of that, the most crucial part of that, is the statement of purpose. So if you don't have a clear statement of purpose before you start your paper, before you start the rest of it, writing it all down, it's going to be a little confusing. This is the central point of it's not the rationale, it's the central purpose of your research, of your work. The rationale is kind of talking about why you made the decisions that you made, or why it's important to talk about this. But the statement of purpose is actually what you're talking about. It's your argument. So it's so important. It's the center of your paper. Everything in your essay, everything in your research paper revolves around this statement of purpose. So your statement of purpose must be informative, yet brief. It needs to be short. It must express the main action of your paper. What are you doing in your paper or in your research? It must be written in the active voice. So for example, the purpose of this paper is to argue for an alternative approach to analyzing data on adolescent sexual activity. We present 4 arguments supporting Jones's 2005 proposal to analyze such data from a dynamic systems perspective instead of applying an individual level approach. Okay, so this is an example from research analyzing adolescence. Right, and then you don't want to flip it around, because the research, this is the important part of the statement of purpose. The purpose of this paper is to argue for an alternative approach. The important part of this statement is not this. We present 4 arguments supporting Jones's proposal to analyze such data. This is not the main part of your paper. This is. So you don't want to flip it around and have the author that you're supporting or the author that's arguing against you first, because they're not as important as you. This is your paper. So this is a bad example. A proposal to analyze adolescent sexual activity data from a dynamic systems perspective is offered by Jones. Jones's proposal is against applying individual level analyses to these data. In this paper, we are in agreement with Jones's position and rationale. Again, this is not emphasizing your paper, this is emphasizing Jones. You want your paper to be the focus, so you're going to start it with that. Okay. So I want you to go to quiz 7 and complete questions 5 and 6. 5 is looking at the statements of purpose from other authors. So you're going to pull out your 4 articles and look at the statements of purpose from other authors, pull them out, type them out, and then you're going to create your own. Just one, or you can try on a bunch of different ones. Send them to me in the quiz, but choose one in the end for your actual introduction. So I hope this makes sense. It needs to be informative. That's why you need to talk about your purpose. You're emphasizing your purpose. Even if your purpose is to agree with another scholar or extend the ideas of another scholar or create an alternative to what another scholar did, your paper is the focus of your statement of purpose, not the other scholar. However, you should always, if that is what you're doing, you should have that other scholar in your statement of purpose, like in that example. Some of you are doing your own research. You're situating it in the introduction against other people's research or showing how there's a gap in some other people's research, and you're filling it in. But if you're doing your own research and you're not just proposing an alternative to somebody else's work, you're actually conducting research, doing surveys, quantitative research, qualitative research, you're going to talk about that in your statement of purpose. The purpose of this paper is to explain, is to answer this question, there are a lot of different ways to write that. Okay. So after you've completed the section with the statement of purpose, 5 and 6, we're going to look at theoretical framework. So this might not be relevant to some of you. Some of you, which most of the time you are going to have some kind of theoretical framework behind. For example, there's always theory behind why you chose to do your research in the way that you did. So why did you choose that method to conduct your research? Why did you choose to conduct qualitative research instead of quantitative research? So you need to provide a theoretical background or theoretical framework or reason for that. For some of you, there might be a theoretical framework for your actual topic, like why your topic is important to look at. Especially, for example, in education, looking at if I'm going to conduct research on women's literacy, I have to look at theory, all the background of the theoretical framework, even though it's a very practical issue. So for some of you, this might ring a bell, this might sound familiar. For some of you, it might sound completely out there. But I want everybody to try it. So even if you haven't seen any examples of somebody citing theory or theoretical framework in the introductions, I still want you to look at these templates and I want you to try it on. Framework kind of gives, so it gives your reader, so you can't assume that your reader knows the background. Your introduction needs to provide really informative background so that your reader is on the same level as you when they start looking at your own work. Even readers in inside of your field might not know the things that you know that led you to conduct the research that you did or led you to your findings. Your job is to teach them those things so that they can better understand the significance of your results. So providing them with the theoretical framework that influenced you when you were choosing whether or not to do quantitative or qualitative research, or when you were choosing the method of your research or other things. So you need to think about this. You need to kind of reflect on what theories are influencing your decisions to make the moves that you are making when you're writing or when you're doing your research. Okay, so here are some templates to look at. So you can use these in your introduction. Don't use all of them, kind of choose one or two. That'll help you give some background. So the theory or theories I plan to use as a framework for or to inform my study are these theories were proposed and developed by. The sources I want to cite for the theories are because. I chose these particular theories because. Originally, each theory was developed or designed to explain. Other studies have applied these theories are. If my use of the theory or theories is unconventional and has been attempted before, why do I believe it's important to use this approach here? And then you explain why. So it's a way to hook the reader and engage the reader and then explain. The constructs I will use in my study are the following. And if I'm adapting existing, should be ing. If I'm adapting existing theories to my study, my adaptation consists of ... Okay, so you can choose one of these and to kind of just provide some background to your work. So I want you to try it on, even if you're not actually going to do this in your introduction. I still want you to look at your articles. So for question 7, you're going to take out your articles, you're going to look at those introductions, try to see if somebody talks about theory, talks about some kind of framework. They might not mention the word theory, but they might mention somebody in the field that provided them with some kind of framework for that leads into their topic, or when they're talking about their methods, they might explain why they are doing what they're doing, providing some sources, and that might be theoretical more so than just practical information in your field. So go back and see if you can find any examples of that. If you can, for question 7, you're going to write those down. If you cannot, just say, I can't find any examples of that. And then maybe I can find something. I'll look up some articles in your field and I might be able to find some examples for you. And then question 8, even if you can't find any examples of this in your work, I want you to fill out one of these templates. So I want you to reflect on one theory in your field, and you're just going to fill out at least one of these templates just to show me that you understand how to do this and why it's important. Okay, so pause the video and go complete questions 7 and 8. Okay, so if you're at this part of the video, you should have completed questions 1 through 8. If you haven't done that, go back through the video and through the quiz and do that. I want to look back at this theoretical framework thing because it shows all these different tenses. Tenses are really confusing, especially in introductions. You have all kinds of situations where you have different tenses, and even some words might be present tense in one sentence and then past tense in another sentence. For some of you, it's very clear. Like in mathematics, it's very clear. Most of the paragraph is used in the same tense, same style. But in other fields, it's all over the place. Especially when you're talking about other researchers, especially if you are using the active voice with other researchers. So I know that in mathematics you're using the passive voice a lot when you're talking about other researchers. You're not saying this researcher does this. You're not talking about the name of the scholar. Usually the scholar's name is just in the citation. But in other fields, the scholar's name is actually really important, so you're going to be using the active voice more in that case. Let's look at this again. So the theory I plan to use as a framework for or to inform my study are, so this is present tense, but it's future, talking about the future, because in the introduction you're talking about what you will do in your paper, right? So it's acting as though you haven't done the research yet. You can also talk about your paper in the present tense. These theories were proposed and developed by Erickson. All right, so this is something that happened in the past. When you're talking about something that actually happened in the past, it's a physical action that occurred in time, one time, you are going to use the past tense. It's not something that's written in the papers. It's something that actually physically happened. You can use the past tense. So again, even when you're talking about yourself, if it's something you did in the past before doing your research and all of that, you can use the past tense. So here you say, I chose these particular theories because. You can also say, I have chosen these particular theories, because that's past and present, so a little more, it's a little safer. All right. Other studies that have applied these theories are, this is the present perfect. Other studies that have applied these theories are, so when a researcher is not important, you're not talking about specific researchers, you're talking about the study, the object, then that's going to be in the present perfect. Present perfect is used often in things that were true in the past and are still true now. It's also used, the same form is used for the passive voice. And here's the present tense. So basically, let's look here. There are three basic tenses that we use. By default, if you don't know which one to use, just go with present tense. Present tense is just the default academic tense. So if you don't know, to be safe, just go present. And if you are very sure that you can use the past or the present perfect, then do that. So the past tense is used when the agent, past simple is used when the agent is important. The subject, the person, maybe the scholar, is important. So you're introducing other research conducted by a specific named researcher. Somebody specific. If it isn't specific, if it doesn't matter who the agent is, who the researcher is, their name doesn't matter, it's only in the citation, then you're going to be using the passive voice. So that doesn't work with past simple. Past simple is active. So if you have a specific named researcher that you think is important to actually talk about in your paper, then you're going to use the past simple. And discussing your research methods. So you're discussing things that you did in the past, or you chose to do in the past. You can use the past tense. However, I've seen people use the present tense as well to discuss that, or even the future. Okay, so, but you'll see different examples of this. So again, whenever we're doing any of this, I want you to look at the articles, those 4 articles from your field, and see if you can identify moments where the author uses the past tense, or the present perfect, or the present simple. All right, so the present perfect. The agent is not important, and it's also still true today. So present perfect expresses something in the past that is still true right now. So you have to make sure that anything that you're writing in the present perfect fits into that. All right, so when you're referring to a previous research, so you're giving background on the research on the scholarly work on your topic. Using the passive voice to describe a method or a process. So when you're talking about something that doesn't require an agent, there's no important person conducting the process or conducting the method. It's just that method exists, then you use the passive voice. But it's crucial that you know that the passive voice is not something natural. Like a natural process, like the rain falls, you're not using the passive voice because nothing makes the rain fall. You wouldn't say the rain has been fallen. No, it just falls because it's a natural process. There is no agent. Here in the passive voice, there is an agent. There is something causing something else to happen, but the agent is not important. Like the man turned on the machine. If the man doesn't matter, then you're going to say the machine was turned on, period. You're using the passive voice because the man is there, but the man doesn't matter. You're not using a specific researcher's name, so you're just going to talk about the research in general, just like here. Providing background on your topic or idea. Okay, so that's similar to the one above. All right, and then present simple. Agent is important, or it's something that's in the text. So I want to be clear that the text exists now. The piece of paper with writing on it exists now. So when you're talking about something that the researcher says or states or argues in the paper, you have to use the present tense. If it's an action that the researcher did in the past, then use the past tense. So use the present tense also when you're describing something you already know. So if you're giving background on the research but not talking about specific research, you're just talking about accepted understandings about your topic, you can use the present tense. Making general statements. So general statements like, it is commonly known that styrofoam is not recyclable. And then you say, however, we are developing new methods, ... So it is commonly known. You're using the present tense. It's a general statement about something that is true. It's a fact. And usually facts, we say the present tense. The sky is blue. We don't say the sky was blue. The sky is blue. All right, so the sky is blue is not always a fact, but common knowledge. All right. So explaining what is in a text. Again, if it's something that the author argues, it's written in the text, the piece of paper is right in front of you, or it's an article that exists, that is present tense. Okay, so let's go into some details. Let's look at past tense. Here's just some examples. So use if describing something and the agent is important. So it's not passive, it's past simple is active and the agent is important. Perhaps the researcher, and it's something that they did in the past. So Huang investigated the causes of airport delays. You can't say in his paper Huang investigates because it's something that they did in the past. However, if you're not sure, it's okay to use the present tense, just by default. But you know that Huang investigated something in the past and then writes it in the paper. So if you're saying Huang writes in his paper that he investigated, so in the paper the author argues something or says something, and then about an action that they did in the past, you can say that as well. We found, conducted, ... So if you're saying, sometimes when you give results, you're talking about something that exists or something that existed. So if you are doing research trying to discover something that already exists and is already happening before your research, then you're going to state that result in the present tense, right? Because it exists. It's not something that happened in the past. The result is something that exists. That's a present tense. But you can say, we found that this is happening. So you're using the past tense and the present tense in the same sentence. We found that this is happening. We found that this has been occurring for 20 years, even though we didn't know it before now. Right? So you're using all these different tenses in the same sentence. You need to be very conscious, very aware of what tense you're using. The causes of airport delays were investigated by Huang. Okay, here we have a passive voice. The causes of airport delays were investigated by Huang. Huang is still important, and we still have the past tense here, but we're using the passive voice. Because of by Huang. All right, so the causes of airport delays were investigated by Huang. The tests were used, analyzed by. Okay, so this is not as common for most of you. Active voice is going to be very common. If the agent is important, you're going to see that. However, here, the causes of airport delays is more important than Huang. So that's why this goes first. It's not common because if you're actually talking about the specific researcher, typically you're not going to use the passive voice, but you can do it. So I want you to look in your articles in the introductions to see if you see any examples where the author is talking about research and using the past simple, active or passive. You're more likely to find active, but in some of your fields, passive might be in there too. All right, so we can look at present tense now. So the causes of airport delays are complex. They exist, they are complex. So with present tense, if you remember, oops. Let's look here. Describing what we already know, something that exists, something that is happening, happens all the time. Making general statements or explaining what is in a text. So the causes of airport delays are complex. This is something we know. Airport delays appear to have a complex set of causes. Again, something we know. Rogers concludes that this is something written in a text. The Constitution states that. Aristotle argues that. Again, even though Aristotle wrote his paper a very, very long time ago, the text exists today. So you're going to use the present tense to describe what he says in the text. He might not be alive anymore, but his voice still exists in the text today. In his speech, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. says, "I have a dream." All right, so even though he gave the speech many years ago, the written speech still exists today. So you can still say, he says. All right, so present versus past. I was getting into this earlier. In his conclusion, Williams explains that maggots are often found in walls. Let's say that. Okay? So this is using the present tense because we're talking about something that he writes in the paper, that he says in the paper. And we're using present tense because maggots are often found in walls. He found that. He discovered that that was already happening, or that does happen all the time. So it doesn't just happen because Williams found it. It's an occurring phenomenon. So you use the present tense to talk about it. It's still happening now. It is something that happens. If it's something that happened in the past only one time and it's not happening anymore, then you use the past tense. Just like this, Williams found. So again, this is the text, and Williams found. You can use the present tense. It really depends on the situation. But most of the time, the finding is something that happened in the past one time. So Williams found that maggots are often ... For some of you in your summaries, I may have told you ooh, but you're talking about something specific in the writing, right? So you can say, I find that Williams does this, or Williams finds many examples, dot, dot, dot. If the author uses the present tense, then you're going to want to use the present tense. However, a lot of the time you're going to want to say the past tense if it's something like found or did or investigated or conducted the research, you can use the past tense. And if it's something that is in the text that they say in the text, they assert, they explain something in the text, you're using the present tense. So Williams found that maggots are often. So again, even though he found it in the past, he found it is happening, it's still happening, so you're using the present tense. Williams found that maggots were often found, but my research shows that they are no longer found in wood. So you're going to use the past tense here and the past tense here because this happened in the past one time, and your research is proving that this no longer happens anymore. So you're going to use the past tense, right? So don't get confused with these different tenses. All right, and then we have the present perfect. The present perfect is often used to talk about background in your field. So used if the researcher is not the agent. So this topic has been extensively studied by ... So it's something that happened in the past and is still happening now. There has been growing interest in. Recent studies have found it has become a major issue. It remains a serious problem. There has been increasing concern. All right, so these are all different ways to talk about background information for your topic. All right, and then this same study has been conducted 5 times. Several researchers have studied this. So that's normally when present perfect is going to be used. Again, present perfect is used for referring to previous research, using the passive voice in something that happened in the past and is still happening, and then providing background on your topic. Okay, so now I want you to go complete, questions 9 and 10. So you're looking at your articles and you're trying to figure out some information. So I'm giving you a little bit less today. I'm not going to give you the grammar exercise. I'm actually going to do that next week on articles. I know you have a lot. The quiz is longer than usual, so I want to make sure you have more time to do that. So really, really pay attention to the articles in your field so you can use the textbooks, Wales and Feek. They give you some examples of introductions in there, but I think it's more productive to look at your own field. So go to the quiz, complete those last 2, look at examples of how tense is used in your introductions in your field, and then use those as guidelines. Use your articles from your field as guidelines for writing your own introduction. You can even, you've learned this, we've done this a few times in this course, where we have used templates. So you take out information from somebody else's writing and you add in your own, using the basic skeleton of their writing structure, but filling in your own meaningful information. That's kind of like what you're doing right now. You're going to look at the introductions of articles in your field, and you're kind of going to copy, you're going to mimic how they are writing. You're not going to copy and paste what they're writing. You're going to mimic how they're writing and use that same exact organizational structure to be able to write yours. That's how we write. Writing is a conversation. You learn how to write from kind of getting your ideas and copying other writers. Feel free to do that, but don't plagiarize. Don't take their ideas. You just take the structure of their ideas and use it to provide your own information. All right, so again, you're going to focus on your articles. What do people do in your field? And then next week, we're going to focus a little more on the literature review and grammar. So by Sunday, I want the quiz. And I want the introduction. Monday, I want your introduction so that I can edit it, and then I'll send it back before Tuesday night so that you can post it on your blog for your partner to look at. Your partner is going to be a really good resource for showing you whether or not your introduction makes sense to somebody outside of your field. Don't forget all the things that we learned in the other lessons. So using connection phrases. Don't separate paragraphs too often. You want your paragraphs to be really well formed. Each paragraph has its own main idea, and you need to form it around in that structure with the topic sentence and the conclusion. And then you're always transitioning into the next sentence. So, and also try not to make your introduction too long. The key to academic language is that you're saying a lot of information, but in as short a sentence or as short of passage as possible. Okay, so please email me if you have any questions. I'm looking forward to seeing your introductions. Thank you.